Welcome back to the show, everyone. Have you ever felt that sinking frustration when you're ready to hit buy on a new smartphone or a powerful laptop, and the price in your local currency just seems to have jumped overnight? You check a few days later, and it's higher still. We often blame inflation or the brand, but today we're pulling back the curtain on the single most dominant, silent force governing that price tag, the US dollar. To help us navigate this fascinating but often frustrating intersection of macroeconomics and consumer tech, I'm delighted to welcome our guest, insert guest name, a financial market strategist and expert on global supply chain economics. Welcome, guest name.
Thank you, host name. It's great to be here. This is a topic I'm passionate about because, as you said, people feel the friction, but they don't always understand the underlying engine. They think it's arbitrary. It's anything but.
Exactly. Let's start with context. For listeners outside the U.S., why should they care so deeply about the USD, this currency they don't use daily, when they're just buying a gadget locally?
It's a vital financial skill, frankly. We have to recognize the dollar's position as the world's primary reserve currency, a status born out of post-Bretton Woods history. Think of the dollar as the universal binary code of the technology industry. Every screen, every microchip, every lithium battery, from the moment it leaves the foundry in Taiwan to when it's assembled in Vietnam, is invoiced in dollars.
So even if the manufacturer is Taiwanese and the assembler is Vietnamese, the Taiwanese company sends a bill to the Vietnamese assembler, and that bill is in USD.
Precisely. This is the currency of invoicing principle. And the reason is simple: trust and liquidity. If a Taiwanese supplier invoiced the product in, say, Mexican pesos or Peruvian soles, they would be assuming massive exchange rate risk. By invoicing in USD, they transfer that risk entirely to the importer. The chip giant, the smartphone brand, and the freight forwarder all operate in USD because it's the most stable and liquid global currency.
So if I live in Europe and the euro weakens against the dollar, my local distributor still has to go out and buy more expensive dollars to pay the supplier in Asia, even though the base price of the chip might not have changed.
That's the core of the issue. You feel the impact of that local currency devaluation immediately. The local distributor cannot absorb that cost increase. They pass it directly to the final consumer, often adding a currency risk premium just in case the dollar keeps climbing before they sell the entire inventory.
That brings us nicely to the biggest lever in this whole system, the U.S. Federal Reserve, or the Fed. Most people think the Fed's decisions are only about U.S. inflation. How does an announcement in Washington, D.C. indirectly raise the price of a television in, say, Argentina?
It's a global ripple effect. When the Fed raises interest rates, it's fighting domestic inflation, but it also simultaneously makes dollar-denominated assets like U.S. Treasury bonds highly attractive to global investors. What happens then? They initiate what we call a risk-off movement.
Risk-off meaning?
It means large global money managers and investors pull their capital out of emerging markets or volatile assets and funnel it into the safety and high returns of the U.S. dollar. This massive demand for dollars causes the dollar to soar relative to other currencies. It appreciates. I often use the dollar anchor metaphor. The dollar is the anchor of a global ship called electronic commerce. When the Fed tightens the chain by raising rates, that anchor digs harder, dragging down the value of all the smaller boats, the local currencies that are tied to it.
Wow, that's an incredible analogy. So the local distributor wakes up one morning and not only is the core product price high, but the money they use to buy the dollars is also more expensive. It's a double squeeze.
It is, and it gets worse when you factor in the supply chain itself. This is where the bullwhip effect comes into play. Think about the logistics, the cost of filling a 40-foot shipping container, paid in USD, the insurance to protect that container across the ocean, paid in USD.
And oil, of course.
Exactly. Oil, WTI or Brent crude, is quoted in USD. If the dollar strengthens, the importer is already paying more local currency for the freight. If the global price of oil also rises, quoted in dollars, the shipping company raises its base rate in USD. So now you have a double whammy. The service cost is up and the conversion cost to pay that service is up.
That small variation at the start, the dollar's strength, is magnified like a bullwhip's crack when it hits the final price tag on the retail shelf.
This is powerful stuff, but it can make a consumer feel powerless. Let's move into the emotional and psychological side. You mentioned the panic buying effect. How does that mindset actively undermine a strategic consumer?
It's the impulsive purchase that is the main enemy of currency strategy. When the dollar starts spiking, it generates panic. People think, oh no, I need to buy this laptop now before the price goes up even more tomorrow. But often that panic locks them into buying at the currency's peak. They've essentially overpaid due to fear. The smart consumer replaces fear with knowledge and observes the trend.
So what should that domestic economist in all of us be looking for? Give us some actionable, practical application tips. How can we use this knowledge to save money?
The biggest strategic takeaway is timing the Fed and the inventory cycles. First, monitor the Federal Open Market Committee, the FOMC meeting calendar. If the Fed concludes an interest rate hike cycle or hints at a possible decrease, the dollar tends to weaken. That pause is a moment of maximum opportunity because distributors will acquire cheaper dollars when they replenish inventory. Wait 6 weeks after a major rate pivot.
That's a brilliant, non-obvious tip. What else?
Second, look for old inventory months. When a major brand, say Apple or Samsung, is about to launch a new generation of products, distributors rush to liquidate the older stock. That liquidation pressure temporarily outweighs the strong dollar pressure. You might not get the absolute latest chip, but you get a fantastic product for a much lower effective price.
And finally, any thoughts on de-dollarizing our consumption?
Absolutely. As much as you can, choose services or products that bill locally. Prioritize streaming services or software that invoice in your local currency. They are slower to adjust to the dollar and sometimes absorb part of the currency risk. Also, look for products with local assembly. Some tech brands assemble products regionally to gain tax benefits. While the parts are still USD imported, the local labor and operating costs reduce the dollar's weight in the final price, offering a small buffer. Research the assembly origin.
That's a fantastic set of strategies, guest name. We've covered a lot of ground today. We started with the frustration of the variable price tag and ended with a clear understanding that the US dollar, the Fed's policy, and the global supply chain are the three pillars that determine what we pay for our technology.
That's right. Economics isn't an abstract concept. It's the difference between paying $1,000 or $1,200 for the same item. The knowledge acquired today transforms you from a simple consumer into a strategic buyer.
A domestic economist indeed. Guest name, thank you so much for sharing your expertise today.
My pleasure, host name.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. We challenge you to apply the Fed monitoring strategy before your next major technology purchase. Until next time, keep observing, keep learning, and keep saving.